that his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature are clearly seen in the things that have been made, which sounds like a little bit of a contradiction in the beginning because he says the invisible attributes of God can be seen, right? That sounds like a contradiction until I would suggest to you, how many of you have just been in awe of nature? You've hiked in the mountains, you've gone to the beach for a sunset, you've been seen a field of flowers with bumblebees flying around. It's just extraordinary. So there's something about that we get to see the beauty and the love and the power of God in a hurricane, and then when waves are crashing in. How many of you been on the beach and you got just a wave surprised you and knocked you flat on the ground, right? It's crazy. I mean, there's so much power in nature and beauty in nature. And so I love what Paul says in Romans chapter 1 there. So I'm going to make a little bit of a shocking announcement for you tonight. How many of you, when you get a Christmas tree, for Christmas, how many of you get real trees? How many of you actually go and cut down a tree? Really? That's awesome. Okay, so when you cut down a Christmas tree, is it alive or dead? It's alive, right? But for a little bit. Is it going to be alive for long? No, it's on the way out, is it not? Eventually, all the leaves, all the pine needles are going to brown and drop off. So once it's cut off from the life source, it is in the process of dying. And what I'm here to tell you tonight, this will be a little bit shocking, is that evolution is actually dead. Now, I know that some of you are still hearing this in school, but this is legitimate. Scientists by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds are beginning to realize that the evidence that they see in nature cannot be explained by evolution any longer. This is a website, pulled this just yesterday, called The Third Way. I'm going to read this for you, and we're going to get into some sciencey stuff, and if science intimidates you, or if you don't really like science and math and things like that, that's okay. There are going to be some key takeaways for you to understand tonight, and so don't tune out. Hang tight with me here in this, but I want to read this for you because this is straight from their website. The vast majority of people believe that there are only two alternative ways to explain the origins of biological diversity. One way is creationism. By the way, this is an atheist website, okay? One way is creationism that depends on the intervention of a divine creator. That is clearly unscientific. Don't let that throw you off because it brings an arbitrary supernatural force into the evolution process. The commonly accepted alternative is neo-Darwinism, which is named after who? Charles Darwin, exactly. Which is clearly naturalistic science, but ignores, listen to this, again, this is an atheist website, but ignores much contemporary molecular evidence and invokes a set of unsupported assumptions about the accidental nature of hereditary variation. In other words, this is a group of atheist scientists that no longer, they say it can't be God, we don't believe that, but it can't be neo-Darwinian evolution either because when you understand the complexity of how molecules work and how atoms work and how cells work, it's absolutely mind-blowing how brilliant it is. And so I'm actually a farmer, which sounds kind of crazy, but I started a nonprofit 20 years ago called Do Good Farm that exists to end hunger and malnutrition by teaching people to grow their own food because we want to feed people that are starving in the world. But instead of just handing out rice and beans over and over again, we want to create sustainable ways to generate a food source perpetually. So if I've got, let's say, a bunch of money and I want to go feed people with it, I can go and buy a bunch of food. But then once I've fed people, the food is gone, the money's gone, and now 4 hours later they're hungry again. And so we wanted to invest in infrastructures, farms, that would grow food sustainably, regeneratively to feed people in need. So we have projects in Africa where they don't have access to fertilizers and farm, equipment and things like that. So we had to begin to learn about how these natural ecosystems can be used to grow food because the rainforests and jungles have been growing trees for thousands of years without farmers, no fertilizers, no inputs, chemicals. Nature is absolutely brilliant at creating its own fertilizers. And the secret sauce to regenerative agriculture is microbes, beneficial bacteria and fungus in the soil that literally is like a fertilizer factory. How many of you have visited a car factory like Ford or something up in Michigan? Okay, you have. Anybody else? Nobody? Factory back? Okay, great. How many of you who have visited a car factory walked into that factory and said to yourself, wow, isn't it amazing how millions of years of wind and waves and air blowing created this factory? How many of you thought that? Nobody did, right? Because you walk into a factory and you immediately recognize that it was designed by intelligent designers, right? And that's the same thing that you will encounter with nature as well. And that's why so many scientists are beginning to reject evolution as having any explanatory power whatsoever over the scientific evidence that we see. So, one of the things that Christians always get accused of is this argument called the God of the gaps. What this basically means is that we just throw, as Christians, we just throw God in the gaps of our understanding. In other words, we don't understand how something works scientifically, so we just say God did it, right? That's the accusation that is made against us regularly. But I want to combat that a little bit for you tonight, because this idea of intelligent design is a group of world-renowned scientists all over the world that are literally studying science to read the book of nature, as Paul said in Romans chapter 1, that verse that I showed you. That if we study science, we can actually learn more about the designer who created it in the first place. And what we're doing is using well-established scientific principles to examine the evidence to prove that God exists. Now, here's another term that's kind of important to understand when we think about this. There are two kind of broad categories of science. One is operational science. So that is, you drop a ball and you measure how fast it accelerates as it drops, and you can measure the speed of gravity, and you can do that over and over and over and over again and study it and look at it in real time. So it's repeatable in that sense. Forensic science, the word forensic, what does that make you think of? Anyone? Crime scene investigation, exactly. So it's exactly what forensic science kind of is. So with a crime, a murder, let's say, you come upon this murder scene, you're not actually able to repeat the murder scene over and over and over again to study what happened in that. So what you're doing is you're looking at the evidence that's in front of you, and now you have to reason, use logic to look at the evidence and say, okay, what could have possibly caused this in a way that explains the evidence that is in front of us, right? And if there's an explanation that doesn't account for all of the evidence that's there, it's not a good explanation. So what we're doing when we're looking at things like evolution, how did we get here? How did the universe start? How did life begin? How did we get from a single-celled organism to all of the diversity that we see in life today? You have to do forensic science, where you look at the evidence that's in front of you, but now you have to use logic and reason to infer back to what could have possibly caused that to happen. That's really important. And the reason why I tell you that is because I would offer to you tonight that scientists, even though they may have a lot of degrees and letters after their name, and they may be even famous on YouTube, like, it's okay to actually question what they are telling you, because some people will actually reject where the evidence naturally leads, which is an intelligent designer who is God. Some people will reject that simply because they don't want there to be a God. I had a good friend of mine, he's been in apologetics for a long time. He did a presentation. He was invited in by a university professor to share his explanation of why evolution is not explained by the evidence. So he came in, gave a great presentation, and then afterwards, they ended up going out to lunch. And the guest speaker was having lunch with the professor after this class and asked the professor, like, hey, what did you think about the lecture? Did the evidence make sense? Did the explanation make sense? He says, oh yeah, it made total sense. It was a great lecture, all of that. He said, so why do you still believe in evolution? And I'm going to say something a little bit shocking here for you tonight. Here's what the professor told the guest lecturer. He said, because if evolution is true, I can sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. Because the instant we start saying that there's God, what does that mean? Now, I have not only does the evidence point that there was an intelligent designer, but this God actually has the authority to speak into my life and tell me how I ought to live my life. And the other thing that I would offer to you kindly and gently, is that if God made you, he knows how you were best made to work. And when we don't operate in the fullness of who he has made us to be, life is not going to work right. We're going to malfunction and break. So let's look at some scientific evidence tonight. Again, if you're not sciencey, if this kind of stuff throws you off, hang with me, because we are going to give you some things that'll be key takeaways tonight. So first thing I want to tell you, science, especially forensic science, which is what we're talking about, science doesn't say anything, scientists do. Let me say that again. Science doesn't say anything, scientists do, because we have to actually look at the evidence in front of us and use our own logic and reason to infer back to causes that might have given us the evidence that we have in front of us. So imagine you are walking down the beach, nobody around for miles. You're looking this way, that way, you're looking back into the dunes, nobody's around for a mile, but you see this written in the sand. Do you instantly think to yourself, wow, how cool is it that the wind and waves wrote these words right here in the sand? Anyone? Nobody thinks that. And that's absurd. It's dumb, right? Nobody thinks that. And yet, I would offer to you that when you look at how brilliantly complex with rich information is in our cells and in our DNA, you have to do this kind of logic to think that this happened by chance. Now, here's a well-established scientific principle, which is why I'm telling you that we're not throwing God in the gaps of our understanding. We're using well-established scientific principles. How many of you have heard of this scientific project, not a Christian scientific project. This is just a scientific project called SETI. All right, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. This is satellites all over the planet that are literally just pointed out into space and listening, right? What are they listening for? When they're listening out, they're trying to find out if there's actually intelligent life forms out in the universe. They're looking for intelligence, and what are they searching for? Anyone? Nope.
More living organisms in our galaxy?
Yes, and how would they determine if there are other living organisms in the galaxy? So they hear things all the time. They hear things like static, that kind of stuff. Does that tell them that there's intelligent life forms out there? No, what they're looking for is they're looking for information. Why? Because we know, scientifically, it's well established that if we find information, then we know that it's coming from intelligence. That's a well-established scientific principle, right? Now, this is a clip from a movie. Actually, let me back it up real quick. From 1999 called Contact, about the SETI program. It's fictional, but there's a really key point in here that I want to play for you. So this main character, Jodie Foster, she's the girl with the glasses there. She's part of the SETI project, really passionate about finding extraterrestrials out in the universe. And she just spends like years just listening. I mean, it just talk about a boring job, right? But one day, this is fictional, but one day she's sitting out, she's listening, she's got her headphones on, she's listening to this stream that's coming in through the satellite, she's got her eyes closed, and then all of a sudden she starts hearing the sound that she doesn't recognize. It's the first time that she's ever heard it. Her eyes open up. She starts freaking out. She jumps in her car from being out in the satellite field and just is flooring it back to the lab where her coworkers are and just trying to get them on the radio, panicking because this is a big deal. She's never heard anything like this in her life and in this study process. So they get back to the office, and I'm just kind of setting up the clip for you, and this is kind of what we get to as they are listening to this signal that's coming through. If you can bump up the volume. Right now it's just going to be staticky, but pay close attention to what she says at the end here.
All right, let's restart. Wait a minute, those are numbers. That was 3. 1 before was 2. Base 10 numbers. Just start counting now. See how many we can get. 1. 7. Suppose 2, 3, 5, 7. Those are all prime numbers. And wait, it's a natural phenomenon.
Anybody catch what she just said? No way that's a natural phenomenon. Now, do you think that anybody in the audience watching this movie is saying, oh, she's a religious nut? She hears information and all of a sudden it's got to be an intelligent life form. No, nobody thinks that because we all know that information comes from intelligence. So if she's getting information in the form of kind of a universal language, which is math, it's got to come from an intelligent life form. So when we see information in nature, we know that it came from an intelligent life form unless, as Paul said in Romans chapter 1, God has made himself known to every single human alive. But some, Paul says, suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Just like that college professor said, I don't want there to be a God because I want to live my life however I want to live it. You with me? So we're going to look at all kinds of incredible information in nature. We don't have a ton of time tonight, so buckle up. We're going to kind of move through this pretty quickly. So information comes from intelligence and messages come from minds. There is more information in a single cell amoeba than there is in an entire encyclopedia. Now, y'all don't know what an encyclopedia was because now you have Google. But when I grew up, this was Google. You had all these books that were alphabetized, and if you wanted to look up amoeba, you would pull out the A and you would find it in alphabetical order. There's more information in that amoeba right there than in all of those books combined. Bill Gates, everybody know who Bill Gates is? He started Microsoft, really launched personal computers. Like, you wouldn't have the iPhones and things that you have today without this guy. He and Steve Jobs were revolutionary in the 1980s for creating computers and personal computers and things. He said this: DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. There's more information in DNA. Now, because DNA can store information, how many of you have learned about DNA yet? A little bit? Okay. So, anybody know that there's 4 letters in DNA? What are they? A, T, C, and G. Yes, good job. So it's like a language. It's a computer language, but computers are binary, which means there's only 2 characters in this language, ones and zeros. But with DNA, there's 4 characters, so it can hold a lot more information in it. Scientists, atheist scientists, are studying right now how we can store information in the storage mechanism of DNA because it is so much vastly more brilliant than any storage mechanisms that we have. And I'm about to blow your mind with this. All right, this is what this one article said. Even better, DNA can archive a staggering amount of information in an almost inconceivably small volume. Consider this: humanity will generate an estimated 33 zettabytes of data by 2025. That's 3.3 followed by 22 zeros. DNA storage can squeeze all that information into a ping pong ball with room to spare. The 74 million bytes of information in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. could be crammed into a DNA archive the size of a poppy seed. How many of you have ever seen a poppy seed? Like bagel with little poppy seeds on it, or lemon poppy seed cake, right? The little black dots, that's a poppy seed, right? So the entire Library of Congress, the biggest library in the United States, all the information in that library, which is many buildings combined, can be stored in the size of a poppy seed if DNA was used to store that information. 6,000 times over. Split the seed in half and you could store all of Facebook's data. Facebook owns and operates, and I think it's more than this since I last pulled this information, 18 data centers, big, massive warehouses. If you've driven down the interstate and seen like those big Amazon warehouses and stuff like that. So Facebook owns warehouses, 40 million square feet of space to hold all of these computers that just store data. Every time you post a picture or post a video, it's got to go somewhere. This is where it goes. 18 data centers all over the world, 40 million square feet, and that's just Facebook alone. Listen to this. DNA could store all of the world's data in one room. Save it in DNA. Listen to what this article says. What makes DNA so appealing for data storage is, 1, it's high density. You can store a lot of data in tiny amounts of mass. 2, stability. Dried DNA stored in a cool environment can last thousands of years. Oldest DNA sequence is 700,000 years old. Did you know that 3% of all of the world's energy use goes into cooling These data centers, millions and millions and millions of square feet, these computers generate a lot of heat, and like 3% of all the world's energy that is used goes to cooling these data centers, right? It's crazy. 3, energy efficiency. It doesn't take much energy and space to store DNA, just enough to keep it cool. Relevancy, biological systems use DNA, and therefore DNA with its possibilities to encode and decode information will not become obsolete. It's going to be around forever is the bottom line. So, with this understanding here, we can actually take all of the world's information, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, US, China, Russia, all of the information in the world, and store it the size of a human being. Right now, like what humans have created doesn't come close to comparing to how brilliant what God designed is. Are you with me here? 40 million square feet for Facebook, yet you could take all of the world's information, which is Facebook, and much more, and store it in the size of my body. That's how much information is in DNA. And science knows that information comes from intelligence. DNA is not like a written code. It is a written code. Okay? You with me? All right. Let me advance here. All right, so abiogenesis, 2 massive problems that scientists have still today. Number 1, how do they explain the origin of the universe, that something came from nothing? And number 2, how did life begin from no life? Chemistry has never, ever been shown to move towards life. And so when scientists tell stories of how it happened, it's important that we fact check it to see if their story is actually even possible. So I am giving you permission tonight to actually question your teachers. I'm giving you permission tonight to actually question when you see a National Geographic video that tells you that something happened over millions of years. Because what they typically will do is just throw, how they accuse us of throwing God in the gaps of understanding, right? What they do is they throw time of the gaps. I would call it father time of the gaps, that they just say, oh, this just happened over millions of years, right? Do you have a question? Yeah, fire away. That's okay. I'm going to keep going because we have a lot to cover tonight. So it's okay to question your teachers, and it's okay to say to question even well-known scientists. So some say that life equals matter and energy, right? It's much more complex than that. Real quick.
Is it true that dolphins evolved? No, the swimming dinosaurs evolved into a dolphin?
I don't think that's true. I don't believe that to be true. One of the things, I'll just give a short, quick explanation. So the process that animals use to do echolocation, have you ever heard that term before, echolocation? Right? Dolphins use echolocation. They send out little pings, and when it bounces off of something and comes back, they can better understand the environment around them, right? Any other animals that you know of that use echolocation? Bats, right? Okay, they are nowhere near in the same line in the evolutionary tree, this fantasy evolutionary tree that's been established. That is a very complex process to do echolocation. There's so many examples like that. I mean, we could literally talk for days and days and days about examples just like that. There's no way this happened by chance. So, some say that life equals matter and energy and evolved from this primordial soup of chemicals and things that had some heat in them and all that kind of stuff. And so some of the early forms of heat before, again, there's no life. This is the story that they're telling you, right? Some of the early forms of heat, fire, lightning, volcanic energy, and then thermal vents in the ocean. Like this is the kind of energy that we had back then. Let me ask you a question. If you were to plug your cell phone into, or try to charge your cell phone with any of those energy forms, what would happen to your cell phone? It's done. Because harnessing energy is actually really complicated. You have to have the right voltage, you have to have the right amps, you have to have the right connector. And like this thing has to be actually intelligently designed in order for us to have energy to have life. So there's a couple of things that are really important in studying what life actually is. This is from the website study.com. Number one, in order to have life, it has to have the ability to reproduce, right? Because evolution, which is the theory, the idea that animals have small mutations, and then they have babies, right? And then those babies carry on the mutations that supposedly make them advantageous for life, and then they carry on those changes, and then another mutation happens, and they carry them on. So there is no evolution if there's no reproduction. You with me? Right. So in heredity, we have to actually pass on genetic material, which is information. Cellular organization, living things are made of cells. Growth and change, we have to be able to respond to the environment around us in order for us to survive. And then homeostasis, maintain a stable internal factors. That's actually really hard to do. We have to get the waste out of us without allowing bad stuff to get in us. That'll kill us. And then metabolism, we have to use resources to survive. So harnessing energy is actually really difficult. Like we said, if you were to go and try and charge your cell phone in a volcano, it's not going to work. Now, ATP synthase. ATP is the energy battery of life. How am I doing on time? Is this my countdown? Okay, whew, we got to hustle. All right, ATP synthase is the engine that charges batteries. Okay, listen to basically the way that this works. How many of you have been to like the Hoover Dam, or you've seen, right? So basically what happens is if you were to take this water and from a river and build a dam, you've got the stored energy on the left, you allow it to pass through, creating a gradient that spins a wheel, and then that wheel is a generator that creates energy. You with me? Are generators intelligently designed? Yes, they are. Generators are intelligently designed. That is exactly what ATP synthase is. Every living thing in the universe gets its energy from ATP synthase. ATP is the charged battery. ADP is the battery itself. Atheist scientists said this about ATP synthase, that generator. Listen to what he says. The most impressive nanomachine of them all. It's hard to convey the astonishing complexity of this protein motor. It is a motor. How many of you would ever walking through the woods and see somebody left a motor in the woods and say, wow, that must have just gotten here by chance, right? No, nobody thinks that. This is precision engineering. Listen to what an atheist scientist is saying here. This is precision engineering of the highest order, a magical device. And the more we learn about it, the more marvelous it becomes. Quick video.
The barrel-shaped rotator is composed of 10 to 15 protein parts called subunits. The rotator spins around, transmitting mechanical energy into the drive shaft of the machine, which helps make ATP. This drive shaft has a specially placed bump that opens and closes parts as the drive shaft spins around. This bump opens special protein subunits on the bottom of the machine.
So ADP is the battery, ATP is the charged battery.
When the bottom subunits open, a spent energy molecule called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, enters the machine. The mechanical motion causes the ADP to bind with an additional phosphate group, creating the ATP energy molecule. And the ATP drifts off into the cell, ready to power some biomechanical reaction.
Now this is crazy slow motion right now. Let's,
This ATP synthase motor is used to recharge dead atoms, ADP, turning it into ATP. It doesn't look all that complicated until you realize it looks more like this. And this is slowed down by more than 10-fold. And the cell membrane is so densely packed with these machines, they effectively make the entire surface of the membrane.
that means the entire surface of every cell in your body, of the trillions of cells, is covered in this, and this is how we get energy to actually live, to function in life. So there's a paradox here that's really, really important. So in order to get ADP and ATP, to make one ADP battery, so just to make the battery itself, listen to this, think about it, this evolutionary theory that life evolved from chemicals in this primordial soup, right? There's no life anywhere at all. There's no energy motor to create energy for anything. So in order to make one battery, you with me? Hang with me. In order to make one battery, you have to have 7 already charged batteries to have energy to make one battery, right? So in order to make a battery, you have to already have ATP. You have to already have the charged battery in place in order to make an empty battery to begin with. And in order to have ATP, in order to get ATP, you have to have ATP synthase, which is this brilliantly complex molecular machine that charges the battery. And so you can't have that unless you have ADP. In other words, logic does not allow this to happen by chance and random blind forces. It does not work. The scientific evidence does not explain the theory of evolution, which is why so many scientists are leaving it. So right now, evolution is like the Christmas tree that you cut down. It still looks green right now because it hasn't gotten out to the masses yet, but I'm telling you, evolution is dead. In the next 10 years, this is going to be a massive conversation that's happening. It's already happening. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here. Dun, dun, dun. All right, we're almost out of time. Here's what I'm going to do for the sake of time. We are going to look at baking a cake. So I'm going to do a little demonstration for you because we are out of time. We are going to bake a cake and pretend that this is going to be an analogy for how life started, right? So what I'm going to do is take ingredients for a cake and mix it in here. We're going to make this very complex wedding cake, right? So we know we need sugar for a cake, right? We know we need flour for a cake. But again, you don't get all the ingredients for the cake in the proper measurements and form and and life is vastly more complex than this, right? You're going to have whoops, that didn't go in. You got to have eggs for a cake, right? But again, you don't get to take it out of the shell and crack it and stuff. It's all the shells, all the stuff is there in the beginning, right? You got to have some oil. Oil is really important for a cake, right? We're going to make this a chocolate cake, so we're going to put some chocolate in there as well, right? You got to have icing for the cake, right? Got to have some icing, right? But we're going to throw the container in there because, again, you don't get to separate the icing from the thing. Now all we need to turn this into that is time. So let me ask you a question. I promise you, if you were to actually study the complexity of a cell, it is vastly more complex than that wedding cake. Is anybody going to actually believe that if you just had all of the ingredients there and a little bit of heat, throw this on a volcano, that you're going to have life that comes out of that? No, but this is exactly what brilliant scientists with lots of degrees and letters after their name are actually telling you that you should believe. And I'm telling you, it's okay to actually question what they are teaching you. And I want you guys to think critically, think for yourselves. Don't just be spoon-fed all of this stuff that you hear and you're scrolling through on your phones and you get these videos about how evolution and over millions of years and all this kind of stuff. No, they're just saying it doesn't work. And here's the last thing that I'll tell you and we'll close out. There's another scientific principle, well established. Atheist scientists believe it, called the second law of thermodynamics. Any of you heard of that? A subcomponent of that is called the law of entropy, which says that things tend toward disorder, not order. Basically what that means is entropy will turn a building into a pile of bricks, but it will never turn a pile of bricks into a building, right? That's a well-established scientific principle, and yet that's exactly what scientists are telling you is happening when life organized and evolution happened and stuff. So good science says that there is an intelligent designer out there that we call God. And I would just offer to you that God, if he actually made you, if the things in your body have a purpose, then your entire body has purpose. And if you operate contrary to the purpose that he gave you, you are going to malfunction and break. Last little story. Suppose I am from a different country, third world country. There's no such thing as washing machines. And all of a sudden, I come to the United States and somebody shows me this washing machine. They take my clothes, throw it in there, and all of a sudden my clothes come out clean. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. I don't have to go down to the river and scrub on a washboard to clean my clothes. Oh, I've got a great idea. I've got tools in my garage that are filthy dirty. I'd like to get them clean. So I take the tools, my chainsaw and my sledgehammer and my drill and everything, and I throw it in the washing machine because it washed my clothes and got my clothes clean. What's going to happen when I throw my tools in there? It's going to break because it wasn't made to do that. Exactly the same thing is true with your own life. When you operate contrary to who God made you to be, you malfunction and break. God is not a radical dictator in the sky that wants you to behave well. He wants life for you. He loves you. And when you operate contrary to what he made you to be, it's like the washing machine. It wasn't never made to clean your chainsaw, right? So trust God. He loves you. He wants life for you. And he said in the garden that if you operate contrary to this, it's actually going to lead to malfunction and brokenness and emptiness. Amen? Let me close this in prayer. God, you are amazing, Lord. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. Thank you for your gospel that allows us to be restored into right relationship with you so that we can have life and light and freedom. Thank you that you are a God that loves us like that. And I pray for every single person here that if they have any questions about you, that they would know that they are fully loved by you, that they would know that it's okay to question because that's seeking truth and you are truth. So if they seek truth, then they will find you because that's exactly what your word says, that when we seek you with all of our heart, we will find you, Lord. I pray blessings upon them and that they would be vessels of life and light and freedom into the schools around them that they go to, that they would carry this message of light and life and freedom to kids that are hurting and broken and malfunctioning. These kids carry a message of life. Bless them as they do that. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.